Over the last almost 3 years at this point, I've found that these tips have been really helpful for me in upgrading my booth. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Desiree, mom of 3 and the owner and maker behind The Handmade Mom. Okay, so this week we're going to be doing a chill sit down video because it's about to get wild for the next couple of months with market vlogs. So we are going to be sitting down talking about 5 vendor booth display tips. Over the last almost 3 years at this point, I've found that these tips have been really helpful for me in upgrading my booth and making changes and things like that. I will show you guys, which I have shown you guys in previous videos, but in case you are new, here is my very first market setup. And here is my current market setup. So, or at least the most recent one. It's constantly changing. Every market, there's always something different. So yeah, this is where we have been and where we are now. Now, I do want to say that these tips have been helpful for me, and so maybe they might be helpful for you, either some or all, but just know that based on what you are selling, there are going to be so many other things that you have to consider for you and your display and transportation and all of that stuff. So just keep that in mind. These are just things that I have found that have really helped me. So the first big tip that I have is to use height. Use height on your tables, use height on your actual display pieces. You don't want to keep things all stagnant at one level. For me, I use wood crates that I actually stack up. I sometimes use a scrunchy pegboard that's pretty tall. I have a shelving unit that is taller than the table that I use. I have a glass can stand, the stepladder stand that has varying heights. All of those things create this visual appeal because it gives the eye kind of motion to follow as it's looking through your booth space. So using vertical height is going to be so important. It's going to create interest. You can use the varying height for different reasons. One of the things you could use height for is for keeping things away from kiddos. So if you have something breakable or things like that, which sometimes I do this with my glass cans, I will put them on my folding shelf, but on the top 2 shelves, so that way kids can't reach them. I think this one is definitely a tip that has drastically changed my booth, and it's one that you can make a change and see the difference very quickly. 2 that were probably the most helpful for me, and that first one was definitely going to be the varying heights of display pieces, and then the second one is going to be this one, which is branding and logo needs to be included everywhere in your booth. Whatever your branding is for your business, include that in your booth setup, right? So it wouldn't make sense if, for me, I had, you know, black tablecloths and I had dark wood display pieces, and I had, you know, maybe a dark green as an accent color. Like, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up, right? But like, those would not make sense because my branding is a lot more girly and feminine and on the dainty lighter side. Colors like the light pink, the white, natural wood, things like that, those are all fall within my branding colors, and I incorporate those all throughout the booth. I even take this down to the details of how I package products or how I display my products. I'm just going to stick with colors because that I feel like is very obvious to see that I'm doing that. But the glass cans. So in my glass cans, I incorporate my branding by using pink tissue paper. I have pink tissue paper in the 16-ounce glass cans, and then in the 20-ounce, I actually don't have anything in there. It's just the tag that's on there. But I use the pink paper to indicate what size it is. So when I'm talking to customers, I can say, oh, the ones with the pink paper are 16-ounce, ones with no paper are 20-ounce. But I specifically chose to put pink paper in there because it fits with my branding. If I put in there purple or blue or green, that would look a little off with my branding. It would stick out, but not for probably the right reason. You also want to make sure you include your logo all throughout your booth. I was actually really bad about this. It took me a while. I didn't get my logo up into my booth until pretty recently. But putting your logo on your table, whether that be a magnetic logo sign like I recently created. If you want to see how I created that, you can watch this video here. But you can do a logo like that. You could do a table runner with your logo on it. I used to have that. I'll post a picture here of what my old one used to look like. You could do a banner on the backside. I've seen a lot of people do the banners on the backside of their booth. I also see banners on the front side, on the little front flap front edge thing of the tent. I've seen those, but including your logo in various spots. If you have a checkout stand, this is another great place to include a logo right on the front of your checkout stand. Other places that you might not think about having your logo, but you probably should, is on your product. On your product in various ways. So again, going back to the glass cans, right? I have my logo at the bottom of the glass can. It has a hand wash only reminder on the bottom, and my logo is at the bottom of that. I also have my logo on the little price tag hanger thing that I have on my glass cans. So I include my logo there. In my apparel, I have my branding on the inside of the shirt. On most of my laser items, not everything, which again, I'm not perfect at all of these and I am working to improve and constantly make changes, but on my laser things, I also try to make sure I laser engrave the logo. So the car charms are a really good example. On the back of the car charms, I have my logo laser engraved onto that. So including your logo in various places, not only so when people see your products there at the booth, right, and they're looking at it, they're gonna see your name as they're looking at your products, but also when they purchase those products and they take them home, they're gonna be able to look back and say, oh, I bought this from the Handmade Mom, and then they may go and follow you, and they may go and tag you in a Instagram story, in a post, in a review, in something, right? That way they know where they got that from and they can go back and share how much they loved your product. So including your branding, and that is colors, the vibe, the aesthetic, all of that in your booth, plus including your logo all throughout your booth is so, so important. Okay, so this next tip is kind of related to the last one in terms of like colors and incorporating colors, especially for your brand. But for this one, I want you to specifically focus on your display pieces. Tip number 3 is to make sure that whatever display pieces you are using, the colors of those pieces are actually going to complement your products and make them pop. This is gonna vary depending on what display pieces you are using in your setup. If you're using maybe like a table with a tablecloth, that one you have a little bit more flexibility with the color of it because you have tablecloths that you have all the colors of the rainbow. Whatever color you choose, you wanna make sure that it's gonna fit your branding and it's gonna make your products pop. That is the main thing, is that we want our products to look really appealing. We want our products to, you know, grab the attention of customers as they are walking by and get them to come in and look at our stuff, chat with us, all of that wonderfulness, right? So if your display pieces are maybe really, really dark woods, maybe you have a black tablecloth, maybe you have green as one of your branding colors and you decide to go with a green, like a dark green display piece, yeah, that might fit with your branding, but are your products popping off of that? If your products also tend to be on the darker side when it comes to the colors that you use, then maybe putting it on a dark display is not going to be quite the right fit. You want to make sure that whatever display piece you are choosing, that the colors of that display piece are going to enhance your product and really, really showcase it to everyone that walks by. If you're going with something like wood crates, you do have a lot of flexibility with those as well. You can leave them as a natural wood, which is what I do. You can stain them, you can paint them. There's so many different things that you could do with the wood crates as well. That's another great one for displaying items, creating height, and being able to adjust the colors as needed for what suits you and your products. So this next one is going to be something kind of small, and it's definitely not necessary on like a big scale. Like you don't need to go all out on it, but I do think it is really, really helpful. And that is going to be to have a designated checkout area. When I say that, I do not mean you have to go and build this big old, you know, checkout stand, things like that. You don't have to have a checkout stand. You can just have a small section on your table that you already have set up for your display, right? Just have a small section where you check out, or have a separate table that is smaller, that is where you check out, right? Like somewhere that is designated so that way customers know exactly where to go and where they can check out with you. Plus too, it's really, really hard to work around your stuff sometimes when you have the height, the varying heights. I used to have this arch display. It was just an arch and it had like 3 shelves on it, and I would put some of my cups on there. And this was before I had a checkout stand. I used to just kind of work around, and I never had a designated spot, so I would just work around my stuff. It was pretty tall. And then next to that, I usually had my step ladder, which is the one where I put my glass cans on. So what would happen is I would forget to give myself a designated checkout space and have to work through all of the stuff. I can't tell you how many times I knocked over cups. I dropped something, like it was just a mess because I did not have a designated space to put my things for checking people out, right? I have the bags, I have wrapping paper, I have thank you cards, I have business cards, I've got pens, I've got scissors, I've got all these things, right? And I need somewhere to put them and be able to quickly access them. And when I did not give myself the designated space to put those things, it just became chaotic. The checkout process was sometimes honestly a little awkward because I have to be like, oh, I'm so sorry, or like make a joke about something because I knocked over one of my things, right? Like, just give yourself a designated space for checking out your customers, and that way they can put their products down, you can have somewhere to put your things. It's just a really smooth and easygoing process. I will say, I do think that you do not need a checkout stand, but if you have the space to include a checkout stand and you would like to include one, I am definitely an advocate for it because I love my checkout stand. I built it so that way it had shelving inside, so I have space to put all of my things, even my personal belongings, like my bag. Sometimes we have jackets in the colder months, right? Things like that. It was so nice to have that designated space, and it also gave me somewhere to stay and stand and not feel so awkward about like walking around my booth and not really sure where to go or where to be. It gave me a designated place for me to be at, plant myself, and do what I needed to do, while also not taking away from my table space for displaying my products. Okay, now here is the fifth and final tip. This one is not something that like you can do in one market and it will instantly make a difference. This is something that's going to be useful, you know, for the long haul. Okay, so it is going to be having multiple booth setup options. I say this one as a tip because honestly, I have found myself in various situations where maybe the booth size was different than I originally anticipated. Maybe the way that other vendors are set up around me is creating this like awkward setup for me. Maybe I have a corner space. Maybe I have 2 open sides. Maybe I have 3 open sides, right? Like there's been so many different situations and scenarios that I have found myself in when it comes to my display, and sticking with one single setup every single time I went to a market just would not have worked. So just kind of having in mind like, okay, if I have a corner space, this is kind of what I like to do. This is what works well for me. And this is gonna take trial and error too. You're gonna have to test these out as you have these different spaces, right? And it'll be, okay, next time I know when I have this type of space, this is what I can do. Before, I used to just do only a U-shaped setup. I had a table here, and a table in the back. That was the basic gist of my setup. But what happened was I found myself in multiple cases where I had a walk-through booth. So I had 2 openings on either end of my booth, and that U-shape didn't really look right with a space like that. Another one was the San Antonio Christmas Showcase, where I had a corner booth, and I had 2 walkways that were very heavily foot trafficked, and so I had to make sure that I was considering people coming from both sides. I've also had things like a single table setup, like this past market where I had, you know, the 2 tables, and then it was kind of like a Z style, like a modified Z, I guess. If I just had stuck with the U-shaped setup, it would not really have been the best suited setup for this past market location that I was at. Just having some different options that you can use if you run into these situations along the line are so helpful. I know that before a market, it is time crunch, right? We are trying to set up by whatever the time is that the market starts, or whatever time has been designated for us to be completely set up by the coordinators. And it can be really stressful. It can be a challenge. And then if you walk into a space and you see that there's some kind of situation that is causing you to have a different setup, that can add a lot more stress. So just having these different options in your mind that like, okay, I have this one for this type, I have this one for this type. And then if you find yourself in this weird funky situation, you can pull from multiple setups and say, okay, this here, this here, this here. That way you also know that whatever display you're gonna be doing is gonna also still complement your booth, your products, your vibe, your aesthetic, all of that. The biggest thing to think about when you are considering different booth setups, right? And you don't need 50 million booth setups in your head ready to go for any given situation, right? I would say one for a 10 by 10 where you have vendors on either side of you and a vendor behind you, or nobody's shopping behind you, and maybe a corner booth, and probably something with 2 sides open, right? Something like that, and you can kind of take pieces from that. I would say that those are probably really good to kind of have an idea of what you'd like to do. Now, when you are thinking about your setup for these different situations, you want to make sure that you're thinking about the shopper's flow through your booth. So if you have maybe the foot traffic is coming in this direction, right? You don't want to put your back towards that direction and be facing away, because then people aren't going to see your booth. They're just going to walk right past it. But if you have it set up where, you know, you're facing this direction and the traffic is coming this way, there's more of a chance that people are going to see something in your booth. They're going to see the varying heights in your booth. They're going to see your beautiful branding and your colors and all of that. And there's going to be something that catches their attention because it popped off of your display piece, right? And so they're going to be able to clearly see that as they're coming down through the traffic to get to your booth. It is a little bit trickier when you have foot traffic coming from multiple directions. Like I mentioned, the San Antonio Christmas Showcase, I have a corner booth for that one, and there's two walkways where there's pretty heavy traffic coming from both ways usually. So I have to think about that as well. And I tend to make that one where the main foot traffic area is my like front entrance. But I do also have a side entrance where the other walkway is, and I do have a lot of shoppable things on that side as well. So taking that into consideration, your shopper's experience, the flow that you want them to go through into your booth space is going to be really, really crucial when you are kind of figuring out like how you would set up for these different situations and different scenarios. All right, y'all. So I hope that was helpful, these 5 tips. I hope that you were able to incorporate some of these tips into your vendor booth as you are going into this upcoming holiday season. If you did, I would love to see pictures. So feel free to either tag me over on Instagram or shoot me a DM and we can chat, because I would love to connect with you guys. Let me know down in the comments which one of these 5 tips was either something you've done in the past and you found really helpful, or something that you think you would incorporate into your booth. All right, y'all, so that is it for this week's video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. It helps out me and my channel so, so much, and it lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, if you have not already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications. That way you don't miss any future market vlogs that I have coming up. Trust me, there's a lot happening soon. So be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you don't miss that. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, y'all.